G'day YouTube, welcome back to my channel. My name is Stefan, aka Hippo. A week ago, I released this VFX short. So over the next few weeks, I'm gonna break down each one of these scenes for you. So I'm gonna show you the techniques, tricks, products, and plugins that I used to make a composite that is achievable and convincing, even for a beginner or intermediate After Effects user. There's nothing quite like that feeling of finishing off a composite in After Effects and it actually looks pro. So I hope that I can help you achieve something like that with this series of tutorials. Also, make sure you've hit that subscribe button to get notified when each part of this series of tutorials will release. All right, let's get into part one. Here we are within After Effects, your happy place.
At first, we thought they were peaceful.
Guys, this is my little VFX short that I made called The Spheres. And there are 5 or 6 scenes here that sort of portray this sphere in a couple of different locations around the world. And then all of a sudden, they figure out that the spheres are not peaceful. They start blowing shit up, like world engines coming down, just blowing up this abandoned field. And then Gold Coast, don't know if any of you guys know the Gold Coast here in Australia, that's where I live. It's really unfortunate the sphere back there is just blowing up. Is that Broadbeach? Yeah, it's blowing up Broadbeach. Those buildings going down. Broadbeach, you know, relatively nice neighborhood. Wouldn't want to live there on this day that the spheres attack. All right, so as I said, I'm going to go through these scenes and break each one down in a series of tutorials, today being part 1, scene 1. So here's scene 1. I've got my friend Bart here. Great acting by Bart. He's a professional actor. He's not a professional actor. All right, the first thing I'm going to do is take a look at this scene. So what's going on here? What do we have? There's a couple of elements that I'm going to need you to think about. So we've got a moving shot. So the camera is moving. That means we're going to need to motion track this shot. We've got a focus pull. So we've got it going from blurry at the beginning of the shot to sharp. So we're going to have to apply some sort of blur to emulate that focus pull. So that's 2 things. Next, we've got a super backlit scene. So we've got the sunrise pointing at us. So we're going to have to figure out how to light our scene to make it all composite well together. But before we do all that, you need your UFO, you need your object, right? I'll tell you quickly how I got my object. We're not going to cover Element 3D in today's tutorial. That'll be another day. Plus, it's a relatively expensive plugin, so I won't talk about that, but I will give you my Element 3D sphere for free in the project file. You can just download that in the description below and follow along. So guys, Element 3D, in 10 seconds, I'm going to tell you what it does. It does 3D in After Effects. So that's how I made my 3D sphere. But like I said, I will give you guys some elements here. If you don't have Element 3D, I'll give you some elements that you can use if you wanted to follow along with this project. All right, guys, so that's what I have. I have a shot that I need to motion track. I have a focus pull, so I need to make sure that my scene is blurred properly. I've got some backlighting, sunrise, so I need to make sure it's lit properly. And I've got my object, the sphere for the scene. So what is compositing? If I just Google compositing here for a second, guys. Compositing is the process of combining multiple images to form a single cohesive image. So hopefully throughout all these episodes, you'll learn a bit more about compositing. That's the idea. But that's what it is. You're combining things, you're combining elements, you're combining layers, adding light here, adding a bit of color here, adding stuff to maybe hide some of the janky effect work you're doing. Adding stuff to sell the effect, to sell the shot to your audience. So let's get going. I'm going to drag my shot into a new composition. First thing we're going to do is we're going to motion track this scene using Boris VFX Mocha. If you haven't heard of Boris VFX Mocha, it is included with every copy of After Effects. It's the basic version, it's not the pro version, but it is my favorite tracker, and it's a planar tracker. So it's tracking planes. So a point tracker, points, contrast differences based on a point. Planar tracker tracks planar surfaces based on contrast, but it does some freaking magic wizardry to get some great results. It's mostly used for rotoscoping or replacing screens or phones. If you haven't checked out my easy screen replacement tutorial, make sure you click the link up here. Mocha is a great program. Let's track the shot. So click your shot down here in your composition, come up to animation and track in Boris FX Mocha. So what that does, if you click on your shot again and come up to effect controls, it places the plugin in there, and you actually have to click the Mocha logo here to open the program and start tracking. Let's do that. Here's Mocha. First thing that I need to do is change your setup here to essentials. That's the easiest way to do it. And all you need to do is create an X-spline up here. So Control L on your keyboard and draw a shape around the area that you want to motion track. I'm just going to keep it simple and draw a relatively basic shape here. I know that my sphere, my object, is going to be sitting just behind that hill. So I'm going to track that hill. And what you need to be careful of in Mocha is anything interfering with your track. So if Bart, for example, walked across the track, it could ruin the track, but nothing's really moving here in front of it. So I'm just going to keep it like that. I'm going to come over here to my track motion options and basically just select translation, scale, and rotation. So if you just select translation, that means it would only be tracking left, right, up, and down. So if you have a camera movement that slightly rotates like this, right, it's handheld, you can't just use translation because the camera is rotating slightly, right? If you've got a camera shot that's moving forward slightly, again, you're going to need scale. You can't just use translation. Scale will get you that Z depth. Rotation will get you that rotation like that. So for a handheld shot, generally I pick those three. If it's a tripod shot and it just pans up, then translation might work just fine. Or in some cases, you can experiment with it and see what gives you the best result. Skew and perspective are two more options there, but that's more for tracking angles on a perspective, phone screens turning and rotating, stuff like that. So for situations like this, for sky replacement or adding something into the background like we're going to do today, translation, scale, rotation. So that X-spline has created a layer up here. I'm going to rename that BG track, background track, and we're going to need to track that now. So all you have to do is press the track forward button and watch the magic happen. That is now all done, and as you can see, that shape is perfectly tracked to the background plate there. Relatively simple shot, so it wasn't a very difficult track, but that's Mocha, just a quick little sneak peek of it. That's how you motion track in Mocha. Once you're done motion tracking, make sure you come up here and press the Save the Project button. Okay, what that does is that saves it to the layer in After Effects, saves it to that little plugin layer that was created, and that's all you need to then get that tracking data within After Effects. So go ahead, once you've clicked Save, make sure you click Save. Come over here and close Mocha. If you don't close Mocha, you just minimize it, there might be some issues. So always make sure you press save and then close Mocha. So like I said, it's saved it into this plugin up here, but before we do anything, I'm going to make a new null object. So layer, new null object. And I'm going to rename this null object my BG track, which is my background track layer. And I can make that invisible if you want, but I'm just going to leave it there for now. A null object is basically something you can assign keyframes to or assign motion to, and then you can attach things to it, and that will serve as like a little hub. If that moves, anything that's attached to it will move. That way you can adjust, for example, the sphere, we can adjust its position, we can adjust its rotation without bothering the tracking data that we're putting in. Okay. Click on your shot, come up here to the Mocha plugin, open up tracking data, and we're actually going to create some tracking data based on that track that we did in the program. So create track data. There it is. It sees the BG track that we created in Mocha, and I press OK. That has brought the information in, but now I have to change my export option to transform. My layer export, change that to my BG track layer, my null object that I've made down here. And that's it, apply export. What that has done, if we take a look at the BG track layer here, is now stuck that null object to that exact position. It's only been about 5 minutes, guys, and we've already motion tracked the shot. Super easy, great program, I love it. So once we have that null object, we can now attach our sphere. If you downloaded the project file, you'll see that you have a .mov here called sphere craft. And it's actually a cool rotating sphere that I exported just for you guys. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move it roughly into position, scale it down slightly. That's where I want it to be. And I'm going to parent it to the tracking null. So you can take this little pick whip here and drag it down to the BG track, or you could also just do the drop down here and select BG track as that layer's parent. So now when we play that back, you'll see that it's perfectly tracked to that spot where we wanted it to be. So as I said at the beginning of the tutorial, there's three main things here. We've got a moving shot, we've got a focus pull at the beginning of the shot, and we've got some lighting that we need to sort out. So we've done the track. Now let's have a look at this focus pull. So you can see here that the focus is blurry there, and it starts going sharp about here. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take an effect called Gaussian blur. We're gonna drag that onto the sphere layer. Now we've chosen this spot here. That's where the focus pull has stopped. That's where it's gonna be sharp or sharper. So I'm gonna put a keyframe here on blurriness on the Gaussian blur effect. Then I'm gonna go to the beginning of the composition and add some blur and try to match it with the scene. So I've put 20 in there. Maybe that's a little bit too much. 15, let's go 18. Okay, and what that's gonna do is go from 18 down to what we had it to originally, which is 0. So it pulls from 18 to 0. So let's just change that last one as well. You can press U on the keyboard to show any keyframes on that layer. Go to blurriness and let's go to that last keyframe there. What's it at? 0. I'm gonna just change that up to maybe like a 3. Okay, I feel like that matches well in terms of blurriness. Maybe let's make it a 5. No, see? Now it's starting to become a little bit more. 3.5. Yeah, 3.5 works. So from 18 down to 3.5. So that works pretty well. All right, we've done the motion track, we've done the blur, and now we need to talk about what is really gonna sell the shot, which is the lighting. Now, we're blessed here in this shot with a super backlit shot. It's blown out, the sky is slightly blown out, so we can really hide that sphere in there, meld it in, add some effects on top that'll really make that composite stick. So first thing we're gonna do is actually mask a bit of the sphere out. So if you see the moon on like the horizon, or imagine if we can see like Jupiter or something on the horizon, you'd have some sort of atmosphere or fog or something covering maybe the bottom half of that planet or that sphere. So that's what we're gonna do. We're going to click on the sphere craft, click on the rectangle tool up here, make sure your layer is selected. We're actually gonna go ahead and mask half the layer, make sure it's nice and big. And I'm probably gonna mask maybe up to there. Okay, then we're gonna click on the layer, press F to bring up the feather of the mask and just increase that feather until we get to a happy spot. I'm gonna move the layer itself up slightly, increase that feather. So see, if you increase the feather too much, you start seeing the bottom of the sphere. So just decrease it slightly. You can actually go in here and maybe even move the mask up a little. So there we go, it's sitting nicely there, as if it's got a little bit of fog or atmosphere on the horizon there. That's really starting to settle in there nicely. What else can we do to really make this match the scene? Well, I'm gonna chuck a lumetri color on there. So lumetri color is, for me, the easiest way to color grade or color correct a layer within After Effects. So grab lumetri color, drop it on there, open up a basic correction. And what we're gonna do is if the object looks a bit too sharp, or if it looks like it doesn't really belong there, it looks fake, well, it is fake, but it looks a little bit too fake, what we're gonna do is actually gonna increase the shadows here. So as you can see there, if you decrease the shadows, it becomes darker, increase it, it becomes lighter. Also gonna increase the highlights slightly. Let's see what happens if we go 0.2 on the exposure. Let's go 0.5. That's really starting to look like it belongs in this scene. So there's only one more thing left to do, and that is some lens flares. I love lens flares. I use lens flares on most of my visual effects compositing projects. And I'm gonna show you two options. Option number one, built into After Effects, free. Option number two, a really cool plugin called Optical Flares from Videocopilot. What Optical Flares allows you to do is to create super realistic looking flares in your compositions. There's a bunch of presets you can get. If you buy the bundle, you get a bunch of presets. But yeah, Andrew Kramer, Videocopilot guys, really nailed this plugin. Pretty sure he worked on Star Trek, which is why there's so many freaking flares in Star Trek. No, that's probably J.J. Abrams' fault. No, but this plugin, it's great. I use it all the time. Might be a little bit expensive for some of you, but it's 100% worth the money. I've popped the link in the description below. So let's start with the free option. Go layer, new, solid, and I'm gonna create a black a black solid, and let's call it free flare. Then you come over here to your effects panel and just type in lens flare, and there it is. That's After Effects' built-in lens flare effect. Drop it onto your solid. There we go. We can choose a couple of different types here from the drop-down menu. I'm going to pick the 105mm prime. Then come down here to your transfer mode on that layer, or your blending mode. If you don't see that, just click the little button down here, expand or collapse the transfer controls pane. So we're going to choose screen. That's going to get rid of any black element on that layer. And I'm going to move the center of the flare just above the ridge there on the corner of the sphere. And that's a pretty good brightness there. So if you turn that off, turn it on, you can see almost immediately that that sphere is melting very nicely into that shot. But if we play it, we can see that obviously the flare does not move with it. It's stuck. Looks super flat, doesn't really work in the scene. So what we're going to do, open up your layer here, open up the effects. Let's give ourselves a bit more space here. Open up lens flare and make sure you can see flare center. Then come down to your background track here, press P on the keyboard. That'll bring up your position keyframe. Then come up here to flare center. Now, we can just attach this free flare solid to the BG track, but then the whole thing is going to move. We're trying to make this look a little bit more realistic. We want that tail of the lens flare, these bits, to move freely. We don't just want it to move like rigidly. If you ever watch a shot with a camera pointing into the sun, that lens flare is moving all over the place. It's not just stuck. So let me show you that actually first. If I just attach it straight to the background track, you can see, yep, it moves with the shot, but these bits of the sphere look like they just stuck on there. Doesn't look realistic. They're not really moving. So let's unparent that. Come here to your lens flare center. Alt click the little stopwatch next to flare center. Then take the pick whip that is under flare center, not the layers pick whip, the flare center one. This only appears if you alt click the stopwatch. Drag that down and drop it onto, not onto the track, onto the position of the BG track. And then press enter. As you can see, it has moved your flare center, and we cannot actually move the flare center. So what we're going to do on the position of that layer is just move it up slightly, move it to where we want it. Okay, there we go. So let's have a look at what that looks like. So now you can actually see that that flare, the whole thing, all the bits are moving with the shot like it would. Makes it just a little bit more realistic. Maybe that flare is a little bit too bright. Let's actually position it a bit further up. And let's make it maybe 95% bright. There we go. So what we're doing here is actually just blending the top of that hill with a bit of the sky, blend the sphere in there. We're compositing, guys. We're adding stuff there, layering up, adding some light, adding some color grade, adding these flares on there to create something like this. So that was option 1, guys. Let's try option 2 now. So I'm just going to delete that free flare there. And I'm going to go layer, new solid. And I'm going to call this optical flares. So now we're using the Videocopilot plugin. So right click, come to effect, and go down to Videocopilot and choose optical flares. So here we go. We're in. And if you open up the options here on optical flares, you can see that there are some epic different presets. Some of these look very Star Trek-y. Pretty sure there's one called JJ. There it is, JJ. It's the JJ Abrams one. I did actually use that on one of the shots. So this is going to be a sunny scene. So I might just look through here some of these options. Real sun. That looks pretty cool. What about sun digital? Let's do that. Let's go, okay. That looks a little bit better than the built-in After Effects one. And then what you want to do is make sure that you select over here, make sure that it's rendering on black, and then you come to your optical flare layers and choose the transfer mode screen. So now we're talking. This optical flare is looking real good in there. Let's maybe just turn the brightness down a little bit. Don't want it completely blind the whole scene, but that looks pretty good. You can also just move these flares around a little bit. So that's a pretty good spot there. And then what we're going to do, same thing as before, is we're going to attach that position XY to that to the BG track, right? So on your optical flares, open it up here, open up the effects, optical flares, position XY, alt click that guy, press enter, and then pick whip down to your BG track position marker, position and enter. So like it did before, it actually moved it down slightly. So what we can do to combat that is just to scale up this whole layer, just scale it up slightly, and then just shift the position up to where you want it to be. And now if we play that, you can see that it's sticking real nice to that shot with the flare moving naturally with the camera movement as well. So I might just decrease that brightness slightly. Let's try 50. Yeah, we don't have to go too nuts. One thing I forgot actually from before, we might actually have to add that Gaussian blur onto that layer as well. So I'm just going to steal it from the Spherecraft one. I'm going to take the Gaussian blur, press Control C to copy, come up here to the beginning of our layer of optical flares, Control V, and that should actually blur that nicely and reveal those sharp elements as it comes in. One more thing. If you want, you can create a new adjustment layer. Right click, Effect, Noise and Grain, Noise. Add about 4 or 5%, uncheck the Use Color Noise. Let's add 3%. And what that's going to do is it's just going to drench your whole shot with a little bit of noise. Again, that's just a technique to blend things in a little bit. You might see some of the shadows here and there. They all have a bit of noise. It all looks uniform, and it just helps sell the shot that little bit more. So that's it. You've created a VFX composition. Relatively simple one, this one. But what we went through is a bunch of different techniques to sell the fact that we've put this fake 3D sphere or fake spacecraft or whatever into this shot. Just a quick recap. We tracked the shot in Boris FX Mocha. We brought it in, attached our object, in this case a sphere, to that null object, added the Gaussian blur to match the focus pull at the beginning of the shot, masked out a part of the sphere to blend it in, color graded it slightly using Lumetri color. Then I showed you how to use the free flare built in to After Effects. And then I showed you how to use optical flares. I really hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. It is a simpler VFX shot, as I said before, but each of the different scenes that I'll be covering in this series of tutorials uses some different techniques. That's why I chose to do this, because as I was creating them, I'm like, there's some really cool techniques that are different in each one of these scenes. The ultimate goal of just creating a well-composited scene, something that really sells the idea. If you haven't had a look at what Videocopilot offers, I really recommend to go check out their Element 3D plugin, optical flares, and some of their free plugins as well, like Saber. There's even one called Orb. There's a bunch of cool stuff in there that really helps you finish off those compositions. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed that tutorial. Like I said, this is part 1 of a series of tutorials breaking down that VFX short that I made. If you like what you see, leave a comment below. Let me know what you thought. Let me know what you want to see or what you want to learn. I'm going to make sure you've hit that subscribe button so you'll get notified when I drop each one of these new tutorials. Thanks, guys.